Article a little while ago. I saw this. I saw this. I saw this article a little while ago, quite a while ago, when I sort of first started looking at this case, which as I've said before, was quite late in the day. It was probably, I don't know, time flies, eh? Maybe June, I don't know, something like that. The reason I was sort of interested is because I was noticing how many. Well, it was Brett Payne and Kopaka really that sort of made me sort of wonder, and then I was sort of finding that there are more and more police officers who are veterans, and that then I found that there was actually a scheme for veterans to become police officers, a scheme as in a specific program designed to encourage and recruit and sort of fast track veterans. And I think there's been a bit of a push for it, unless I'm getting it confused with something else. I think it's been since 9/11. Yeah, so according to this documentary called The Longest Shadow, 9/11, 20 years later, police departments across the country, so this is from that documentary, The Longest Shadow, eager to avoid the failures that led to 9/11, scrambled to equip officers with the latest in military equipment and technology. They spent a literal fortune on military equipment, and they still get shitloads of military equipment. Much of it made available by a federal government that would spend almost 20 years at war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the police forces, always eager to hire military veterans, were being staffed by people trained to police populations under occupation, not communities on the home front who get to decide how they want to be governed. I mean, everybody should get to decide how they want to be governed, but the point here is that they were hiring, perhaps still are, military veterans to train the police. So they were not only using military level equipment, which they still do, they were also using military techniques, military methods. They were militarising the police. They have militarised the police. And all since 9/11. Critics charged that racial profiling proliferated in cities like Baltimore, where the blinking blue lights became a symbol of life under a surveillance state. And so that's the other element. There's the equipment, there's the training, and there's also the surveillance. And we've seen plenty of that in Moscow, Idaho. Bizarrely, these kids seem to be under surveillance. Never seen anything like it. I am blown away by it. I can't believe it. And one thing that you will hear, and you won't be able to believe this, that in WSU, I believe this has stopped now, but they were actually patrolling the dorms at one point, and it was around 2007, 2008. somewhere around that time, I'll show you the articles. That's another video to be put together. But there was some sort of an outcry from students about it interfering with privacy. But so they're obviously, it's all since Columbine as well, isn't it? And which you need to look into Columbine. That is interesting. That is more than meets the eye. But with this dorms patrolling as well. So when you look at more recent articles, right, there's an officer who turned out to be, basically, it appears that he was a predator. And then you look back at this patrolling of the dorms, and it was this guy who was finding drugs and things there. So this guy who is then, he retires because he's charged with sexual misconduct and basically, I think somebody, it's really unclear as to what happened, because it seems like there was more than one occurrence of whatever was going on with this guy, whatever he was up to. But because I think somebody reported him, but then the person who this supposedly had happened to, she said that it was consensual, but there was more to it than that one occasion. There's more. It's very interesting. So that's for another video. So I've decided to read it today because of somebody that's come up in my travels, my research travels over the last few days. I think I'm just going to put together a massive thing, amazing vocabulary, a massive video episode, whatever you want to call it, with just everything that or most of what I've discovered over the last few days, because there's been quite a lot of different things, and some of it is potentially could be relevant, hard to know what is and what isn't, and some of it's just, I'm just like, oh my god, wow. So I just want to tell you because so as you can see, this article is called When Warriors Put on the Badge, and obviously it's about veterans in policing. Many veterans make careers in policing and some bring war home. Okay, you better get comfortable because this one's a long one and I might have to show you some other bits on the way as well. So, William Thomas, a retired Newark police sergeant, Newark, New Jersey, is that? Left his home in a body bag. To his dismay, he was still very much alive. A team of cops and medical technicians had strapped his limbs together, stuffing his body into a mesh sack to restrain him after he tried to fight them off. 6 hours earlier, Thomas, a decorated narcotics investigator and a veteran of the New Jersey Air National Guard, tortured by PTSD, acquired in Iraq, had downed a fistful of prescription sleeping pills with an entire bottle of Bermuda Bermuda rum. Sorry, I just read the word underneath it. Bermuda bed, and I was like, that's not right. I'm sure it's rum. It is rum. Anybody who's new to this channel, this happens a lot. I'm afraid I interrupt myself and waffle a little bit, and I'm afraid it's unavoidable. I have a terminal waffle, so if it bothers you, there are lots of other channels where they don't waffle, and I'm sure they are more professional and a lot more aesthetically appealing, but I just give you the information. I'm afraid that's just how I do it, and I try my best not to waffle too much, but as you can see, I'm doing it right now. I'm going to continue. Yeah, if it's not for you, that's no worries. There are lots of other very good channels, so I'm sure you'll find another. He collapsed onto his stepson's bed, calmly waiting to die. This was the second time since returning from war and rejoining the police force that he tried to take his own life. The debate over the militarization of America's police has focused on the accumulation of war-grade vehicles and artillery and the spread of paramilitary, I'm having trouble with my L's lately. I feel like my tongue's too big. It's a sign of low vitamin B12, isn't it? Maybe I need to get some vitamin B12 in me. I've got big tongue syndrome. And the spread of paramilitary SWAT teams. What has gone largely unstudied, however, is the impact of military veterans migrating into law enforcement. Even as departments around the country have attempted a cultural transformation from warriors to guardians, 1 in 5 police officers is literally a warrior returned from Afghanistan, Iraq, or other assignments. And now it's 1 in 4. It's 25% now, according to another article I just had a little squiz at. The majority of veterans return home and reintegrate with few problems, and most police leaders value having them on the force. They bring with them skills and disciplines that are regarded as assets. But a Marshall Project investigation indicates that the prevalence of military veterans can also complicate relations between police and the communities that they're meant to serve. And if you're wondering who the Marshall Project is, they're not there. Oh, okay. Oh, hold on. Bear with. Where did I see it? Up here? Oh, yeah. A non-profit news organisation covering the US criminal justice system. And talking of SWAT teams, on the 28th of August this year, so that was only a few days ago, wasn't it? At 6 p.m-ish, or just after, SWAT team provided an agency assist for Pullman Police Department. So I don't know if anybody's heard about that in the news. I haven't actually looked it up in the news yet, but I will do. Yeah, interesting. So, to the obvious question, are veterans quicker to resort to force in policing situations? There is no conclusive answer. Our investigation obtained data from 2 major city law enforcement agencies and considerable anecdotal evidence suggesting veterans are more likely to get physical, and some police executives agree. That sentence is put together really badly. But anyway, moving on. But any large-scale comparison of the use of force by vets and non-vets is hampered by a chronic lack of reliable official record keeping on issues of police violence. Some other conclusions about veteran cops emerged more clearly. That sounds like an oxymoron. Ish, sort of. Doesn't matter why. I'm thinking aloud. I'll try not to do that too much. Veterans who work as police are more vulnerable to self-destructive behaviours. So this is according to their research. So self-destructive behaviours such as alcohol abuse, drugs, and, like William Thomas, attempted suicide. Most law enforcement agencies, because of factors including a culture of machismo it is, isn't it? And a number of legal restraints, do little or no mental health screening for cops who return from military deployment and provide little in the way of treatment. Hiring preferences for former service members that tend to benefit hiring preferences for former service members that tend to benefit whites disproportionately make it harder to build police forces that resemble and understand diverse communities. When William Thomas returned to Newark, the police department offered no services for returning vets, and in fact he says he probably wouldn't have applied for help anyway, fearing a stigma. I just went back to work like nothing happened, he said. He lasted 8 days in police uniform before his first suicide attempt. Tormented by memories of an explosion at the Baghdad airport that killed a favourite K9 patrol dog, unnerved by crowds, spooked by loud noises and argumentative with superiors, I tried to eat my gun. What's his name? William Thomas said. Sounds like a Welsh name. His wife drove him to a nearby veterans hospital where Thomas was diagnosed with severe PTSD. Thomas, now 57, is an advocate in the non-profit military and veterans support group, the Wounded Warrior Project. The vet to cop pipeline. Policing has long been a favoured career choice for those who have enlisted in the armed forces. Today, just 6% of the population at large has served in the military, but, and now it says here 19% of police officers are veterans, but now it's 25%. And I think that is up-to-date information. I can't find a date on this though. But it does refer to 2022, so it's pretty up to date. And that says 25%. I actually thought it might be higher, but I think it probably is higher in certain areas. Like, I think Moscow seems to be quite high, and probably at certain times as well. And I know they have difficulty with recruitment. So, I mean, I don't know if they'd make a beeline for veterans or not, but it's certainly a sort of, I think they have recruitment drives every now and then to try and, when they're having recruitment issues, which I know Moscow, well, Latar County did recently. And last year as well, they took on 6 officers, but only 2 of them ended up staying for the year. And I think Nate Rosendahl was one of those, and I think he left. And according to TNT, Lana, and I've heard other people say that he'd left. But then I saw a video of him in police uniform helping, you might have heard me say this before, sorry, helping rescue a cat. So he looked like he was operational to me. But 25% now, as I said. This is the 3rd most common occupation for vets, behind truck driving and management. The attraction is, in part, the result of a web of state and federal laws, some dating back to the late 19th century, that require law enforcement agencies to choose veterans over candidates with no military background. That's interesting. I did not know. I knew that was since 9/11, but I didn't know. I mean, are they saying that's since the 19th century? Maybe so. It does sound like an old law, but it sounds like an old law that they might have brought back rather than one that continued on, but who knows. In states with the most stringent hiring preferences like New Jersey and Massachusetts, a police applicant who was honourably discharged from the military leaps over those who don't have those credentials. Disabled veterans are favoured over military veterans with no documented health concerns. Are they? That's crazy. So PTSD would count as a disability. So somebody with PTSD would be chosen over somebody without PTSD. That's madness. That's no reflection on people with PTSD. I very much sympathise, very much, but I'm not sure it's the right place to be, is in somewhere where there can be quite jarring episodes. William Thomas, the PTSD afflicted Newark cop, secured a place on the sergeant's promotions list because of his time overseas with the New Jersey Air National Guard. That's interesting, isn't it? Brett Payne, who secured a detective's job before he actually secured a detective's job. Before he secured a detective's job, he became the lead investigator on a quadruple homicide, bypassing sergeants within his department, despite being a corporal, and despite not having become a detective as yet, because we saw in the annual report that he became a detective in December. So he did something similar to what William Thomas was able to do. And secure a place because of his time overseas. And because of his time in the military police, I guess. But this guy was in the New Jersey Air National Guard. The Obama administration helped expand the preference in 2012. The Department of Justice provided tens of millions of dollars to fund scores of vets-only positions in police departments nationwide. Official data on the impact of veteran cops is actually scarce. Nearly all of the 33 police departments contacted by the Marshall Project declined to provide a list of officers who had service in the military. That's weird. Citing laws protecting personal records. Oh, they wouldn't provide a list. Couldn't they just provide numbers? Or saying the information was not stored in any central place. Oh my God. So secret squirrel. The Justice Department office that dispenses grants to hire cops and study policing said it has no interest in funding research into how military experience might influence police behaviour. I bet it hasn't. I reject the notion, this is Ron L. Davis, who headed that, hold on, what did he head? I reject the notion that a returning veteran who has seen combat should cause concern for a police chief. So he's a former police chief then. Ronald L. Davis. Oh no, sorry, he's not. He's a former head of the Justice Department office that dispenses grants to hire cops and study policing. So I reject the notion that a returning veteran who's seen combat should cause concern for a police chief. I would even hire more if I could. But even those who advocate hiring combat veterans as police officers have raised alarms. The Justice Department and the International Association of Chiefs of Police put out a 2009 guide for police departments to help with their recruitment of military veterans. The guide warned, sustained operations under combat circumstances may cause returning officers to mistakenly blur the lines between military combat situations and civilian crime situations, resulting in inappropriate decisions and actions, particularly in the use of less lethal or lethal force. So Martin Smith responded to a call about a suspicious black SUV. We know a suspicious black SUV. Seconds later, he shot and killed the unarmed motorist through the driver's side window. It's interesting. In court papers, lawyers for the dead man's family said Smith later told his co-workers that he blacked out and had a PTSD moment during the shooting. Smith had returned from deployment at a time when law enforcement across the country was really trying to figure out how best to deal with the number of folks who were being activated. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. What do they mean by activated? Are they talking about like active shooters? I tried to Google it and that was the nearest thing that I could get. I don't know if they meant people who are leaving the forces. Does that mean they're activated? But that sounds like deactivated to me. I don't. Anybody fill me in on that one? Then police chief Ray Schultz said in depositions, according to court papers, Smith rejoined the force with 100% disability rating. 100% disability rating. It's like, yeah, let's have this person suffering from flashbacks, and that's absolutely no shade on anybody who's disabled. I have a disability as well. Now I'm just going to leave you to guess what it is. But it's like, it's when it's something like you're in the police force, it just sounds crazy. I can't imagine me being somebody that they'd want to hire because of my disabilities. You've got to get real, haven't you? I mean, Smith rejoined the force with 100% disability rating, suffering from flashbacks, blackouts and waking nightmares, but he probably didn't tell them about those. Nevertheless, oh yeah, I suffer from flashouts, blackouts and waking nightmares, and they're going tick, 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 you're in. They probably hadn't mentioned it, to be fair, because people don't, do they? Nevertheless, the department assigned him, oh my God, to patrol a high crime area of town known as the war zone. Are you kidding me? The Albuquerque force has been cited by the Justice Department for a high rate of unjustified police-involved shootings. According to documents provided to the Marshall Project by Albuquerque police, of the 35 fatal shootings by police between January 2010 and April 2014, 11, nearly 1/3, were by military veterans. So 11 of the 35 fatal shootings were by military veterans. Neither the Albuquerque Police Department nor the city attorney responded to questions about the shooting. In two other cities that agreed to provide data to the Marshall Project, Boston and Miami, internal police records indicate that officers with military experience generate more civilian complaints of excessive force. Without knowing such details as age, duration of military service, and the officer's assignments, it's impossible to rule out other factors. But in both cities, the difference is noteworthy. In Boston, for every 100 cops with some military service, there were more than 28 complaints of excessive use of force from 2010 through 2015. So bearing in mind this article's from 2018, I think. For every 100 cops with no military experience, there were fewer than 17 complaints. That's not great either. Lieutenant Michael P. McCarthy, a spokesman, said the department would look into the apparent disparity. He added that veterans tend to be younger are more likely to be assigned to units such as drug and enforcement, which attracts more complaints. We try to culturalize and desensitize these veterans. Teach them about unconscious bias, de-escalation tactics, said the city's police commissioner. That's what they tell you, William B. Evans, in an interview. In Miami, based on data from 2013 through 2015, for every 100 veterans on the force, 14 complaints were filed. For every 100 officers without military service, 11. Well, there's not much difference there, to be honest. And I think that isn't Miami Vice. I bet they have more than that. They're hiding them down the backs of the sofas or whatever. The Marshall Project also obtained data for the Massachusetts State Police, which showed no significant difference in complaints against vets and non-vets for excessive force. The International Association, but I also wonder, because as we know, men are very competitive. Women are very competitive as well. But with sort of the macho-ness, I think it encourages women to be, it's called internalized misogyny when women do it. I think that just having those people on the force, if they are more likely to use, having people like that, whether they're military or not, who are more likely to use excessive force, creates a culture of it. Because like I said before, when I worked in children's homes, there was a lot of restraining of kids, and I was never involved in any restraints. But when I think about it now, I just think it's completely inappropriate, and I don't know why any of us just thought it was. Well, we didn't really think it was. We thought it was a bit dodgy, weird, a bit. I think it's confused. It's hard to know, because you have restraint training, or you used to, with kids, and certain kids would kick off deliberately because they want to be restrained, because it's like physical contact. But I don't know, I feel like the staff liked it too much as well. I think there were certain members of staff who wanted to restrain kids. Not that I saw anybody causing it, but I don't know. But it creates that sort of culture. But it was weird, because it was at a time when the culture was really changing. So they'd sort of employed a lot of people who were sort of ex-students and things like myself, and they were trying to sort of change the culture. Because before it was just a boys' club. But when I say boys, they were all men, and like I said, there's one guy who was a bouncer. Actually, he's one of the least aggressive. He was quite mild-mannered, but they were employing people from walks of life like that. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, we need, and to be fair, you do need. Where I worked, some of these kids were aggressive. They're not children. It's called a children's home, but they're teenagers. And I actually had to have one boy. The police came to see him because he kept hitting me, punching me on the arm when he walked past me. And so I reported it to the police in the end. I think somebody encouraged me to do it. I had bruises all over my arm. So, so it was kind of like, not like we didn't need, a bit of muscle. We needed to have some people there who were able to deal with a situation that might escalate, but we also needed to have people there who might not escalate a situation. And I think that's a bit of the problem it can be with the police, especially, I'm going to put it into the description. I put a video out a while ago, and it's this store had called the police and reported that a homeless man was wandering around the car park trying to open car doors. I think they said he was homeless and impaired in some way. I can't remember if they said they thought he was drunk or had taken drugs or something. And this guy clearly has mental health, has some kind of psychiatric disorder. He's hearing things, but you don't realise that initially. But they treated him like he'd resisted arrest, where I think he may have tensed up somewhat, but they didn't even speak to him. I mean, they just called him and then immediately tried to arrest him. It's horrendous. Yeah, have a look at that. It'll be in the description. I think, and apparently that's kind of, I need to find I like to have receipts. I need the receipts to show you that that's been a thing with SWAT teams, and basically just can't be asked to do all the de-escalation because it takes too long, and just basically deliberately escalated so that they could then take out the threat, eliminate the threat. And that's kind of language, that kind of distancing language is a problem, I think. Like not calling things what they are, that's obviously what they need to do in the military because of being in situations that you're in, but not on Civvy Street. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, the largest organisation of policing executives, published in 2019 a survey of 50 police chiefs about their experience integrating returned soldiers. 14% reported more citizen complaints against veteran officers. 28% reported psychological issues, and 10% saw excessive violence. Another indicator can be found in a survey of nearly 8,000 police officers by the Pew Research Centre, asked last year whether they had ever fired their guns in the line of duty. 32% of military veterans said yes, compared to 24% of non-vets. But I'd like to know if were there more military veterans in roles where they were more likely, like on SWAT teams kind of thing. But still, 32% is really high. So yeah, to be fair, that's not a great excuse. Who have we got now? Bob Jones. So the other, don't ask, don't tell. When police officers return to work after a military deployment, they cannot be automatically required to sit for a mental health evaluation. Well, no, but there was, I'm sure it's Whitman County, and one of the bosses was in trouble because he hadn't done certain tests, and I thought they were psychiatric tests on staff because he was getting staff from other counties. He skipped that bit but he was in trouble about it because they said no, you're still supposed to do that. And I think it was like, it made the news basically. It was a big enough deal, so they should be having psychiatric tests anyway. I think everybody has to if you're joining the police, and if you're moving from one police force to another, by the sounds of it, unless it's just that it's just unless the policy is different for different police forces. But I would have thought most, I don't know, but I would imagine that most have that standard. So anyway, I'm sure these guys know more than me, so let's listen to them. The federal I think I have to start again, otherwise we're all going to forget what we're talking and what's going on. When police officers return to work after a military deployment, they cannot be automatically required to sit for a mental health evaluation. Apparently, the Federal Uniformed Services Employment and Re-employment Rights Act prohibits it. Because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, police departments can't reject a job candidate for simply having a PTSD diagnosis. I don't know what I think about that. Well, maybe not for simply having one, but maybe they just need to find out more. And usually they find an excuse to not employ you. Like, oh, they won't tell you that that's the reason. They'll come up with some other rubbish that you didn't interview very well or something like that. Or, they don't actually necessarily have to tell you. I think they like employing veterans, so I don't think they need to hide behind all this. I think if they didn't want to hire them, they wouldn't. They'd find a way out of it. The only time most of Americans' law enforcement officers, military veterans or not, are required to sit for a mental health analysis is when they first apply to join a police force. I need to find this article that I just referred to. And the rigour of the screening varies widely. Fewer than half of they have to do polygraphs as well. I couldn't actually believe how many different things that they had to do for like, it didn't sound like it was, well, it clearly wasn't just for people who were being recruited. It was for people who were moving between counties. Fewer than half of the nation's smallest police departments conduct pre-employment psychological tests at all, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Oh, right. So this guy was of Justice Statistics. This guy was probably just doing what everybody else was doing, but he got caught. Many other departments offer screenings in name only. In some cases, simply a computerised test with no face-to-face interview. You can imagine what it's like, can't you? Oh, don't worry about this. Especially if they're a veteran or something. They get all the kudos and they're like, oh, don't worry about it, and I don't think they would be, I'm not exactly going to be shining a torch in their eyes. They're not going to give them the Chris Watts treatment. In some cases, simply a computerised test with no face-to-face interview, says Stephen Curran. And now, I think I pronounced this wrong. It's not Maryland, is it? It's Maryland. still don't think that sounds right. Police psychologist who has researched the transition from the military to policing. Where there is systematic testing of would-be police, military veterans are more likely to show signs of trauma. Be interesting to know how they test them. What do they do? Come up behind them and shout boo? How do they do these tests? I might see if I can find one online. Matthew Guller, a police psychologist, is managing partner of a New Jersey firm, the Institute for Forensic Psychology, that works with about 470 law enforcement agencies across the Northeast, screening for impairment. Of nearly 4,000 police applicants evaluated by Guller's firm from 2014 through October of 2016, those with military experience were failed at a rate higher than applicants who had no military history. 8.5% compared to 4.8%. The higher rates of trauma are exacerbated by the fact that service members suffering PTSD often aren't diagnosed and keep quiet about their suffering. Yeah, I can imagine that. Although up to 20% of those deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD, only half get treated. As I said before, my son's dad went to, I always get muddled up which one he went to. I think it was Iraq. Or was it Afghanistan? I don't know. I wasn't with him when he went there. But after he came back, that's when we were just kind of friends for a while. And just realised what story I'm telling. Well, we basically just used to get drunk all the time because I'd just come out of a relationship and he'd just come out of the forces. So that's a recipe for disaster. So we were both would go out drinking, and he'd got a job as a bailiff, and he hated it. He just kept letting people off because he just hated being an arsehole to people. So I don't know if you have bailiffs in the, well, you do, but you call them something else. Debt collectors, basically. I would imagine you might not have that term. He didn't like doing it, and he ended up just like not being able to basically be enough of a hard ass. But he said that he'd gone and got signed off from work and said that he got PTSD, but he hadn't got PTSD. And now I think, had he got PTSD? Did he just say he hadn't got it? Because obviously he didn't want to admit that he had. They'd given him medication, but he didn't take it. I think he might have had it's possible he had had some, but nothing that I saw. No actual reactions that I saw. No specific kind of like acting out or anything like that. But anyway, yeah, I might have to cut that. Probably shouldn't be telling these stories. Veterans are 21% more likely to kill themselves than adults who never enlisted. I can imagine that being the case. PTSD and traumatic brain injuries have been called the signature injuries of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Experts say trauma is cumulative, so the transition from one potentially violent profession, the military, into another, policing, can compound the risk. Officers with a history of mental health problems, even those who have been treated and are now healthy, can pose a twofold problem for departments who hire them. First, their history can become a liability if the department is sued. Second, it can be used to attack their credibility on the stand if they're called to testify. Mental health advocates and union leaders say the safety net for struggling cops at most police departments is minimal to non-existent. Even departments sensitive to mental health issues are in a difficult position. Top brass need to be able to take unstable cops off the streets lest they hurt someone or themselves on the job. Yet cops must feel they can ask for help confidentially without jeopardizing their careers. Yeah, there was I always say this. There was this thing. I can't remember it. Martin Freeman. He's out of The Office and he's in The Hobbit. So the English version of The Office with Ricky Gervais. He was in this cop thing and he was having mental health issues, but it was quite obvious how you basically he was seeing a counsellor, but it was kind of obvious how hard it is to admit to it, to get help, and it can affect promotions and things. And I mean, mental health should be your priority over promotion, but see, it's like people just, it's really hard to actually admit something, like physically get the words out sometimes. And I don't really like the fact that you have to go to a GP, so your primary practitioner in this country, to do that. I think there should be somewhere that specialises in mental health, and you go there. You know, they know why you're there already when you've walked in the door. That's what the place is there for. You don't have to because GPs aren't great at handling it. Everybody, apart from people who are working in that field and people who have mental health issues, and even then sometimes, or have had them, and even then sometimes we're not great at handling other people's. Everyone else definitely, well, not definitely, but often don't know what to say and don't know, and often give off the wrong vibes, not the vibes you're looking for when you speak to somebody and about your mental health. And I think there should be a way to tell somebody about it without having to say it verbally initially. Like, you should be able to maybe fill in something online, and then they know that you need, and they can call you in, and then you can discuss it. It's already been written down, and that won't be as hard. You can tell I've had experience of this situation. Yet cops must feel they can ask for help confidentially without jeopardising their careers. or you're never going to get cops to come forward for treatment, says Brian Fleming, a retired Boston police sergeant who ran the department's peer support unit from 2010 to 2014. The lack of official attention in many cities has spurred police unions. God, this is the longest article ever. Are we near the end? Oh my God, there's another. Right. I think we get the gist of this. I probably should scan through and see if there's anything else of interest. I did want to show you actually. I meant to show it earlier. So this is where I got the 25%. Well, actually, it doesn't say 25% of veterans. It says nearly 25% of today's law enforcement community has a military background. So they weren't. So is everybody a veteran, even if they like going for a year or something? Well, surely you have to go in for longer than that. But this I thought was interesting because it talks about problems recruiting police, and then it says here a solution to police recruiting challenges is VTF. I can't remember what that stands for. Veteran Transition Forum. Veteran Transition Forum's Keep America Safe program. And ironically, it's basically hiring loads of veterans who are maybe that can backfire, really, can't it? Trying to keep America safe, and we're just like might be taking out people left, right and centre, slamming them onto the ground. Although it just doesn't seem like it's just veterans, but it creates that culture. I think it creates a warrior-like culture. A lot of machismo. I don't know why that word is not. I've heard it a million times, and I feel like I can't remember it now. The Keep America Safe program leverages our veterans' maturity and experience, and they've just said a lot of them are young, so they're just using. So they're trying to say that veterans are more mature and experienced. But then when they want to make excuses for them, they say, "Oh, they're all just youngsters." They can't help it. They can't help using excessive force. So the Keep America Safe program leverages our veterans' maturity and experience in de-escalating or appropriately managing stressful, often violent situations, their passion for service to their community, and the key qualities of being drug-free, physically fit, and respectful of the law governing our society. And one of the biggest problems in the military is anabolic steroid use as well. And in the police force, actually, but that's probably because a lot of the police force are from the military. So this is just marketing, isn't it? Talking a good talk. Keep America Safe connects transitioning service members and veterans who have already entered the civilian workforce to state and local law enforcement agencies after providing basic information such as the nature of their discharge from active service, date of availability, and just because you weren't dishonorably discharged doesn't mean you won't have PTSD and you won't be very affected by, well, basically have PTSD. And I think it's actually a bit more difficult to identify than people realise, because there's also you can have sensory flashbacks, which I wasn't really aware of, sensory and emotional flashbacks, which are a bit like panic attacks. And that, so, I mean, it's not great if you're having panic attacks anyway, because they are just the most terrifying things in the world. And you just cannot tell the difference between, if you're having a panic attack, you cannot tell the difference between because it causes so many physical symptoms, and because it comes out of the blue, like it's not just going to come when you're just anxious or anything like that. It could just pop out the blue. Then it's extremely confusing, because you're just having these like physical symptoms that are so similar to what you would assume is a heart attack. It is just bizarre. Hard to understand if you've never experienced it. You might be tempted to say get a grip, but seriously, it's absolutely insane. Until you have one, you wouldn't know what's hit you. And I get the impression these sensor, it can be similar but more sort of dissociative. But I feel possibly I may have experienced it myself. So I do sympathise with this. This is clearly a new recruitment drive to get even more veterans into the police when they've already got 25%, because there was a previous programme key findings that in the past 2 years law enforcement resignations increased by 18% and retirements by 45%. Jeez.